Uzoma Nwachukwu.
That's right on. I believe that's his name.
We'll find out if he's good or not by the end of the season by whether or not I can pronounce his name.
Probably not.
Let's put it that way. No, I mean by the end of the season if I've heard it talked about.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we'll see. So A&M on offense, a lot of questions.
There's a lot of questions. The running back I do believe is a strength. However, I think the offensive line, as good as they are going to have to get used to this new system. Now, they were used to firing off the ball and really getting into people, where now they're going to be in more of a zone,
right,
and they'll be dropping back into pass protection more. It'll be interesting to see. I just really feel bad for the running back because I don't think he's going to get nearly the play that he got last year.
No, probably not. And just speaking from personal recollection here, with when Auburn kind of tried this in 2008 with not Al Borges, but Tony Franklin.
The Gulf Coast offense.
The Tony Franklin experiment.
Right.
The offensive lineman, like you said, kind of had to shift from a downhill type blocking scheme to more of a zone feel. The lineman actually lost quite a bit of weight.
Right.
And that was not a good experiment.
No.
So
it did not work out too well.
But at the same time, I feel like Kevin Sumlin knows what he's doing more than Tony Franklin does.
I agree.
So we'll see. And this kind of brings in a larger question, kind of the same question with Missouri. Can Texas A&M and Missouri find long-term sustained success with this type of offense?
I think Texas A&M can more than Missouri. I think they've got the pipelines for recruiting. I think they've got the better coach. I really do like Sumlin.
Yeah.
And I think they've got the defense that's really going to mesh well with the SEC. The offense might take a year or two to kick in, but I really think their defense is going to make an impact right away.
Well, let's talk about that defense. To be honest with you, not any names that I recognize in this lineup. Strength or weakness for them?
I think it's a strength. They've got a linebacking core that's one of the tops in the nation. They've got Sean Porter, Steve Jenkins, and Jonathan Stewart. Combined, they almost led the nation in sacks. Now, as a core in defense, it wasn't just the linebackers, but they know how to blitz and they know how to come off the edge. A great unit last year at tackles for loss and sacks. However, they didn't really force a lot of turnovers. Their secondary was weak all year last year. They got thrown on all the time. But we've said it 1,000 times on this show. An SEC defense first has to stop the run.
Right.
And I think Texas A&M is going to be able to do that. Now, they're still pretty weak in the secondary, but I think their front seven is going to be really good.
Yeah, and it does start with the front seven. I mean, even if you look at like the 2010 Auburn team, secondary was terrible, but the defense was good enough at stopping the run to keep themselves in games.
That's right.
So, I don't know. Defensively, I kind of agree. Secondary, going to be a little rough, playing some younger guys, but when you have three senior linebackers like that who, can really carry the load and make sure everybody's lined up correctly,
right.
And it sounds like they're kind of an aggressive attacking defense, which tends to work a little bit better in the SEC, throw offs at the opposing offenses. Maybe they got a shot. I would say probably right now mid to lower tier defense in the conference.
I would agree with that. It all hinges on the secondary. If they can get some good plays out of the secondary, maybe a couple of turnovers, I think they could be a pretty good defense.
Yeah, so let's take a look at Texas A&M's schedule, opening up puzzlingly at Louisiana Tech. This is kind of like Mississippi State playing at Troy, which is kind of unusual. Texas A&M needs to learn that they're an SEC team and that they should play teams like that at home.
Exactly.
But the week after that, they have a big SEC opener against Florida at Kyle Field. Everything I've read says that the Texas A&M fans are building this game up impossibly huge.
Well,
they're
it's the first
super
SEC.
excited.
They've been waiting for this for 2 years, most of them. They're loud anyway. I think it's going to be a rough environment for Florida, especially for a Florida team that's still kind of in flux as well. It'll be an interesting game.
I think they drew pretty well for their first SEC opponent, all things considered. The week after Florida, they go to SMU, another kind of puzzling thing.
Well, SMU's on the rise now. It's not as puzzling as La Tech.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Then they get South Carolina State at home, followed by Arkansas at home once they sort of get into the meat of the SEC schedule, at Ole Miss, and then they start a pretty rough stretch against some former national championship winners with LSU at home, followed by a trip to Auburn, a trip to Mississippi State, a trip to Alabama, then a kind of a breather at home against Sam Houston State, followed by the game against Missouri at home. So pretty tough sled there.
The second half is brutal. They're going to really struggle. Also, another game that I think could be a landmine for them is that second game against Florida. What you got to worry about and what you've got to be careful about is in a game that's hyped up this much is that you come out and you play as hard as you can in the first two quarters and you're dead tired in the third and fourth. If you'll remember, another game like this was the Texas Tech-Texas game a couple years back with Michael Crabtree.
I do.
They almost lost that game. They were up by 30 points at half. So you can build a game up and use all that adrenaline up in the first two quarters and have nothing left in the tank in the last two.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and throw some predictions out here.
Go ahead.
I see them going 8-4. Pretty solid start for their first SEC season against against this schedule. Losses to Florida, LSU, Mississippi State, and Alabama. Now, the team that is not in there, which this was kind of one that I thought long and hard about. I have this gut feeling, and I've tried hard to explain it, but I feel like Texas A&M is going to beat Auburn.
Okay.
I don't know why. Everything kind of sets up for it not to happen because they're right in the middle of a really tough stretch. They're going to Auburn, but I just have this feeling. I don't know.
I've got to tell you, I've got the same prediction there.
Yeah.
I think they'll beat Auburn. The only other I've got them going 7-5, and the only other loss that I have that I don't think you had. Did you have them losing to Arkansas?
I did not. No, I actually haven't beaten Arkansas.
Okay, I think Arkansas will kind of steady out around that part of the schedule. I think they're gonna. I think they'll take care of Texas A&M.
Yeah, I don't know. Texas A&M kind of a tough team to read for us.
They are.
We haven't seen them.
Exactly.
We don't a whole lot. We don't know.
We're pretty close. They're 8-4, 7-5.
Yeah, I mean, I think most Texas A&M fans would be ecstatic with 8-4. I don't know.
They should be.
I don't know what their realistic level is in Texas A&M. I don't know if they're more like Georgia fans expecting national championship every year,
when you struggled in the Big 12 last year, and now you're coming to the SEC. You should be ecstatic with 8-4.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the expectations aren't too high. But here's my thoughts on Texas A&M long term, though. I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. I mean, people can say what they will about Missouri not being able to survive, but I truly think Texas A&M is going to get up to elite level status in the SEC. Maybe not all the time, but at least once every other decade or so, just because they almost kind of have a leg up on Texas now. Not totally, but they're in the SEC.
In the conference.
I mean, that makes a huge difference, and they're going to start. They've already started bringing in a different type of kid. I heard the other day that Texas A&M in one of the recruiting services is putting together the number 4 class in the country right now. I
can see that short term. It's new. A lot of people are going to like the sparkle. I really think that Texas A&M's probably, in my opinion, is going to be more like a Georgia. Like you said, they'll be relevant every now and then, but I think on average they'll have maybe an 8-4, 7-5 year every year.
Yeah,
maybe even more like a Mississippi State. I think they'll be better than a Mississippi State. I really do think they've got a lot of talent. I just don't know that they can compete every 5 years.
I'd say a good comparison to where Texas A&M should be looking is Arkansas.
No, that's a good comparison.
I think that they can be Arkansas. Maybe not LSU, Alabama, Auburn, one of those
teams. A second-tier team.
Yeah, they can be Arkansas, definitely. So Texas A&M, very interesting to watch. I'm definitely going to be paying attention to that Texas A&M Florida game. I think a lot of people are very excited about that one, and also probably the Missouri-Georgia game that's going on that day as well. So let's go ahead and talk about another team here real quick before we take a break. Take your pick, South Carolina or Georgia?
Let's talk about Georgia.
Let's talk about Georgia. All right. Georgia, like we just mentioned, one of those teams that they really should be kind of expected to have a great season every year with the talent that is available in Georgia and that they bring in. Just hasn't really been happening for them.
It hasn't. A lot of things have happened. I love the Spurrier quote from SEC Media Day. And he says that he loves playing Georgia early in the schedule because he knows at least a couple of them will be suspended.
It's so true that it hurts, though.
It is. Well, even the Georgia athletic director, when asked about this question, he could have made a big deal about it, but instead he said, when he's telling the truth, you can't get mad at him.
Absolutely.
So, and they're running through it again this year. Isaiah Crowell, probably the biggest one that's been suspended. They also have three players in their secondary that will miss the first couple games of the season.
Well, let's start with the Isaiah Crowell thing. Running back becomes a big question for Georgia now. They were already kind of limited on depth. They do have five-star running back Keith Marshall, but he's a true freshman. Behind that, I'm not really sure what
It's
else
a running
they
back
got.
by committee,
You know,
and they had that some last year before they had anybody step forward, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, Aaron Murray, great quarterback, but Aaron Murray cannot be Aaron Murray if there is not a run game to kind of take some pressure off him. I'm just immediately that is the big concern that jumps to my mind.
I agree. I think their offensive line is good enough downfield that they'll open up holes for whoever's back there. I think they can be mediocre in the running game. I don't think they'll be elite. I don't think they'll be what they could have been had they not had suspensions, but I think they'll be okay in the running game.
Yeah, wide receiver, not as strong as it's been in past years. I mean, there's no A.J. Green there, but they still have Tavares King, Malcolm Mitchell, pretty decent guys. Aaron Murray's going to have his targets to throw to.
He's also going to make them better.
Yeah.
He can take decent receivers and make them stand out.
Yeah, so offensively, if Georgia can find some semblance of a running game, they're pretty decent. The thing that really stands out about Georgia is they are freaking loaded on defense. It is when you look through, it is almost unfair what they got.
Now, typically people think Alabama, they think LSU, sometimes they even think Mississippi State when it comes to defense. Florida had a great defense when they were winning national championships. Georgia has that elite level defense right now. They can match up with an LSU defense.
Well,
at every
let me put a caveat on that. They have elite level talent. I don't know that they've performed in that sense yet, though.
They were for Georgia last year. You have to split their year in two, almost the first half of the season, and the second half of the season. The second half of the season, that defense was dominant in a lot of games they played, and I think they've got a chance to do that the whole year this year. If, like you said, if their talent can come to play.
Yeah. Well, let's just run through some of the names here on defense. Georgia runs the 3-4 defensive scheme with the very fiery defensive coordinator Todd Grantham, who, if you aren't careful, will flick you off
very quickly.
Very, very quickly. He's an angry, angry man. But a couple of names that you ought to get familiar with. John Jenkins, the nose tackle, huge guy, 350 pounds, very, very, very good.
One
very
of the
good.
reasons that they run a 3-4 is that they just have one guy who counts for two.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have a guy like that. I mean, like a Terrence Cody type of dude. You almost got to have somebody like that. So Cornelius Washington, one of the defensive ends, another big name to look out for. See if you recognize these linebacker names. Alec Ogletree, Michael Gilliard, Jarvis Jones. It seems like those guys have been there forever.
Right. Very, very talented in the linebacking corps.
It's just talent across the board. I mean, at cornerback, Sanders Cummings, Sean Williams and Bakari Rambo at safety.
Greatest name, by the way.
Yeah, Bakari Rambo. I mean, it just sounds like a guy just flying around, hitting you with his helmet all day.
And that's how he plays.
Yeah.
Now, I think where we've been talking to a lot of these teams, they have trouble in the secondary. They're young, they're untested. Georgia does not have that problem.
They definitely do not have that problem.
They're going to have a really good secondary.
Defensively, I don't see any question marks for Georgia. I mean, I'm sure there are some, but normally there's one unit out of the three that you're just like, well, these two are good, but this one, I don't know. I mean, Georgia looks pretty strong across the board.
They do. However, there are questions with Sean Williams and with Rambo. I think, are they going to be eligible to play early in the year? They've got some academic problems. There's also a couple of reserves who are in that mix, wondering if they're even going to get to play. They're playing it really close to the chest. You're not going to know until the season starts. But if I had to guess, I think especially even after the Penn State deal, they're going to suspend them rather than not.
Yeah.
So if anything, if there's a hole, it's will they be able to play?
Right. You see that a lot with coaches kind of taking a harder stance, sort of an aside here, but Sammy Watkins for Clemson, he's going to be out for the first 2 games. So good or bad news for Auburn fans, depending on your perspective on that whole deal. But Georgia defensively very solid, but overall, I don't know. I mean, maybe the running back thing should not be such a big deal to me, but I think it's a huge problem.
I think it can be a really big deal, especially early in the year as your offense tries to mold and gel together. If you can't get that consistency in the running game, you're going to be down a lot. You're going to be throwing the ball a lot. You could run into some real problems.
Yeah. So let me just say this: if Georgia still had Isaiah Crowell, they would have been my